to the Diamond Breakfast. Now, innovation and knowledge are two entities steadily positioning themselves as the engine of any meaningful social, economic, and cultural endeavor that leads to production. But innovation is brought about by pursuing blue oceans with the goal of improving human life, or in pursuit of solutions to known human problems, coming with new products or new ways of doing things. Now, the end result of innovation is a contribution to the body of knowledge in any given field of inquiry. And with this said, how then is this contribution being made? Are researchers and academians doing enough to contribute to the development of Zambia? This is solely based on where research as well is concerned. How is that translating into development? Joining me this morning is Dr. Chisala Bwalia, who is the Zambia Research and Development Center Program Manager. We do also have Keresia Teranhike, who is the development expert for Zambia Research and Development Center. Good morning to you both.
Good morning. Good morning.
Interesting conversation here that we have, looking into how research is supposed to marry into development. We do get to see a lot of these things. Zamstats will tell us, oh, there are so many, X number of people have access to mattresses, X number of people, are living under a roof, and so on and so forth. We do get to see that. But is it normally where do we get to see the disconnect? Let's start from there, or let's begin from here. Why is this research, so important? I'll start with you, Doc.
All right, thank you so much for that question. This research is very important, as the Zambia Research and Development Center has a clear mandate of, pushing for more research that speaks to public policy and, just addressing the most prevalent social challenges, socio-economic challenges that are facing as a country. Now, where is this disconnect? Yeah, to some extent, from an academician point of view, I'll say that there are times that, researchers do not actually, meet up with, industry experts. Because remember that research has to speak to the most prevalent societal challenges that have been faced. And at the end of the day, there should be a connection between the research that is being conducted and also the prevalent challenges that have been faced in the industry. And so to some extent, there's been that disconnect because most of the researchers are so much not attuned to what is happening on the ground. And so just conduct research as it is research and all that. And so at the Zambia Research and Development Center, it is from that background that this year we'll be hosting the second International Multi-Disciplinary Conference, which is, focused on knowledge sharing, development, innovation, production, and all that. And through that line, we are trying by all means possible to also, promote collaboration and partnerships through this conference, where researchers and industry experts are going to meet, because this is a gap that has been existing for a long time. But at the end of the day, bringing researchers and industry experts together will give us a limelight to work with them, push for more collaboration, and more partnerships.
But there's also just a line of thought that, researchers have just failed to address, the key problems, and like you said, there is a disconnect. Do you agree that, there is failure from the people that do this research? I'll bring it to you, Ms. Teranhike. That there is just a failure for them to marry what the problems are on the ground with their research. But then again, isn't their research based on the problems on the ground?
Okay, so I'm going to start with looking at exactly why do we research here. So the most reason why we come to research is that, one, we want to find solutions to the problems that are obtaining on the ground. And the other reason why we do research is to bridge the knowledge gap. We want to lessen the knowledge gap. So if you look at us finding solutions to the problems that we are facing, definitely we are going to say the solutions are being found. If you look at the research papers that have been written of late, you realize to say we are trying to find solutions to the problems that are pertaining on the ground, but it still stresses to say, how are we implementing those solutions? So it still gets us back to the implementation part. If we find the solutions, where do we take those papers? Are we publishing those papers? Are we sharing sharing what we find on the ground with the people who should implement the policies. So the whole idea of the conference that we are having now is to ensure to say, if we find the solutions, where are we taking the solutions? So that's why we are bringing everybody on board, the lawyers, the people from the industrial sector, the manufacturers themselves, the people from the academia ourselves, the researchers, as well as the policy makers, because we want to have that relationship to say, if I write a paper today about public health or issues to do with development, I should ensure to say I knock on a policy maker's door and I give them that paper, and they're able to interpret it and bring it to the ground and really implement those policies in accordance with the solutions that we are bringing, unlike just bookshelving them, and unlike us not having the platform to really publish our papers. As ZRDC, we've got a platform where a lot of research papers have been put there. But if you ask an ordinary person, or maybe the policymakers, do they have the ability, or do they have access to go and see those papers? Because they're open for everybody. But the problem is that we do not go to such sites and really look at those papers.
Maybe the problem is you're not doing enough to alert the people that that platform exists.
That's why we're here. We're actually doing that here now.
I don't think so, because then you wouldn't be talking about, the lack of people understanding that your research is there. If you take on the responsibility to ensure that you are educating people, you're letting people know, because I'll tell you, I didn't even know you had that platform until now.
Okay.
So that's why I'm questioning, how deep does your sensitization go?
So our sensitization is really taking strides. We should agree to the fact that it wasn't really pushing, because obviously of late research wasn't regarded as much of an opportunity in Zambia as it is now. Because if you look at developing countries, for example.
When you say much of an opportunity, what do you mean?
What I'm trying to say, if you look at developing countries, right, they've developed using technology most of the time. And if you look at it from our point of view, even the universities themselves didn't have that platform, like the platform where you could go and search for those papers, and that opportunity wasn't given to people, even just the students themselves. Now we've got those opportunities in the university themselves, where you can go to the university portal and look at which research was done before, and you're able to relate. You see, so that is what is happening. Our universities today are bringing into platform where you can actually go on their portals and check what researches were done by other people and come to marry them with what you are doing to try to bridge the knowledge gap. But I think we are making strides as universities and as academicians.
Can I just add to that? Yeah. Again, at the end of the day, I think it all goes to the level of investment that we make in research and development, because as compared to Western countries, as they say, and according to the numbers on the ground, you find that Western countries invest so much in research and development, such that the manufacturers themselves, the industry experts, are the ones that are pushing for this research to say, you know what, there's this problem on the ground, there's this climate change issue on the ground, and we want to find innovative solutions to this. We're pumping in $1 billion into this kind of research. Can you do this research? So you find that for them, there is that relationship that is there between the industry and also the research agencies and organizations within that end. But when it comes to this side, it is different. Even the manner of conducting research is different. The relationship that is there between the industry and the researchers is different. And that is why as ZRDC, our focus and our mandate now is to ensure that we bridge that gap that has been there for a long time. We're pushing for more investment in R&D. We're also pushing for more collaborations and partnerships between both the researchers, the research agencies in Zambia and across Africa, and also the manufacturers across Africa. Remember that this conference is an international conference. So not just focusing Zambians only. So it's a global thing. So expecting professors, industry experts from India, from the US, from Canada, from the UK, from Kenya, from Egypt, and all these are specialists in different rights. And we are looking forward to receiving their research, their innovations that they're bringing forward to speak to public policy, to also speak to, bring solutions to the most prevalent challenges that are facing as a country and as a continent at large.
Now, have you done any research as to where the disconnect is between you, the researchers, and the policymakers?
Well, there's some research that has been conducted. It was conducted in 2019. It was conducted by a guy called Boaz here in Zambia. And the issue that was there on the ground is, there was a time that this manufacturing company was trying to pumping some pharmaceutical products, but it was at a time when they didn't have much research to do that, because most of the people just do it for the money. But numbers don't lie. So if we say that, okay, fine, there is this disease, prevalent disease in the community, and then this is the kind of medication that is there because the rest of the medication is not working, what are we going to do? We're going to bring researchers on board, let them do a baseline study, let them do an endline study to bring to focus the numbers, to bring to focus the data that can translate to them coming up with those innovative solutions. And so the numbers are there. Of course, research builds upon itself, knowledge builds upon itself. And so the data that was collected in 2019, may be obsolete, but we are still working on that and basically trying to improve our research base and touching base with the industry itself.
So maybe I can come in.
Yeah.
If we look at ourselves as Zambia, we are a developing country, and if you look at our developing country, most of the time our priorities are basically just shifted to how we can see that we provide our citizenry with the basic needs. So if you look at that, so we are concentrating so much on the basic needs, forgetting that if we invested in research and development, it will give us the solutions that will actually cushion what we are going through as a country in terms of socio-economic issues. So what the policymakers and the educationers should actually work together. We are not working together because obviously our priorities are different. But if we can work towards one priority, which is development, which is ensuring that we provide the food security, the socio-economic issues for our less privileged in society, we are going to easily collaborate and come up with the developmental agenda that we so need, both as policymakers and the researchers ourselves.
What then is the reaction based on the various research that you get to pull together? How do policymakers react to your research?
So most of the time our research are looked into, but the problem still comes to implementation. You will see, to say you knock on somebody's office and you give them your research, yes, they will take it. And they will say, okay, we'll look into it. But how long does it take to look into a research and the conclusion that you've come out with the research paper itself? So it comes to implementation. You can go on to them. They'll actually accept your paper. But for them to implement or to come back to you, let me give you an example. We've been conducting science fairs that we've been conducting at ZRDC. Yeah? So we've got students or young people who've come up with great innovations, and if you look at them, we push them to the National Science Fair, and the people in the government will actually attend those science fairs, and they'll say, we'll get back to you. And some of them from 2018 to date, we've tried following up and nothing has been coming. So our emphasis is that as we are making those strides towards finding solutions to the prevailing problems, can the government also, through the policymakers, support the cause?
So there's been no research that has been supported by policymakers.
There has, but there
What
has
is
been
the success rate?
So the success rate is very little, as in less than 50%, we should say. Less than 50%.
That's very poor.
It's very poor. And you look at the development that we are pushing towards. We are pushing towards an innovative development, a high-tech development that will actually find solutions to our prevailing problems. But if we are not investing so much in research and development, we're not going to find the same solutions that we so need.
Interesting. I'm curious as to also now, I'm sorry, I have to come back to the policymakers because, like you said, if they don't implement, then who? I don't even know if I'm more disappointed than anything, but, looking at the reaction of the policymakers, what other channels have you tried? I know, it's difficult to bring in some of these policymakers, but are you looking at other stakeholders as well to be able to come in? I mean, now there's also a huge cry for the private sector to be able to do what they can. Is this research that you're able to pull together reach the ears of the private sector, and what has also then there been a reaction from the private sector? Because if it's similar to the policymakers, then the problem is even bigger than we think.
Okay.
Sure. So I'll just make mention of one thing. So at ZRDC, there is a project that we started in 2015 called the Community-Based Monitoring System. Now, the CBMS basically spoke to the most prevalent challenges in the health sector, the education sector, the agriculture sector, and through the attainment of the SDGs. The MDGs that time, now the SDGs at this point. And so we had a lot of researchers that came on board, do a lot of research around that area. And apart from that, that research was actually, that project was adopted through the Ministry of Local Government. And so when, you know, they want to disburse CDF funds at that time, they were still coming back to us. Okay, let's see your research about education. How is the state of the education system in this particular area? Okay, about the health system, can we digitalize? What can we do? You know, we go to agriculture. How can we improve the agriculture sector? Can we, you know, forge, you know, smart agriculture, cultural practices, climate resilient practices, and all that. So there has been some strides through our organization, but through PPP, the public-private partnership, we've also made strides through that, because there are a number of collaborators that we have on board, partners that are now working with, not just here in Zambia, but even South Korea, in Russia. Like in South Korea, we're working with KAISK Research Institute. In Russia, we're working with the Russian Pedagogical University, and in some parts of Africa, some other universities. So for us, our mandate is, firstly, academic institutions play a key role in this kind of work, because this research is basically coming from mostly academic institutions. And so firstly, we sensitize academics and say, you know what, as students graduate, of course they're going to write their final year thesis, but let those research papers be well tailored to the actual needs on the ground. There should not be a disconnect between what is pertaining on the ground and what the researcher is thinking. So at the end of the day, we're looking at a more impactful research that has to be conducted. So from the academic institutions, and then now we go to the industry itself. From the industry itself, and then we go to the manufacturers. The manufacturers, we also engage the private companies that are so much in need of this. We also work with non-government organizations in issues surrounding education. Now there's some projects that have been run by USAID in Chinga Province, Girl Child Education projects. We are doing some research on that with them. So there's been some success and there's been some failure to some point.
Right.
But I can say that at the end of the day, we are happy with the strides that we're making, but I know that we can do more and we'll do more.
Right. Now, just touching on to, you know, using the students as well as part of this research, you know, having academic institutions, you know, how then can they also just better prepare their students to be able to contribute effectively? Maybe I should throw this one to you.
Sure. So when you look at the lecturers that we have today, those who've passed through, obviously we've got some lecturers who haven't done teaching methodology, but if you look at those who've actually done teaching methodology, you realize to say we are no longer lecturers in the classroom, we are facilitators. So we've become pragmatic enough that we do not want to lecture for 20 hours and then let the students just listen to our lectures. We want our lecturing, our teaching to be more of on a facilitating side, so that they are so practical. So you realize to say, even when I'm teaching development economics today, what I'm going to teach is that I'm going to give them just the basics, and then I'll let them go into the field and check what is happening in the field. So what has been happening right now is that our students are doing more of research work, more of field work, as compared to just sitting in the classroom. So we want to run away from the theoretical part and be more practical, and that will enhance our development. Because if we're speaking about issues to do with finding solutions, how do we find solutions when we're reading books that were written by Todaro 1998? It's going to be very difficult because the world has evolved. So we want them to go out there and see what is pertaining on the ground, and to visit the NGOs, to visit the Zambia Association of Manufacturers, and so on and so forth, and just to get the knowledge from those ends.
Right,
Let me just add something to that. And at the end of the day, I always say this: the education curriculum has to speak to you know, what is pertaining in the workforce, because at times that the education curricula is so pathetic to a point that, you know, students will be in class, but when they go out there, they're so irrelevant.
Yeah, it's like how people wonder how Adama, I think it was, is working for them today.
You see? And so it is always important for academic institutions to ensure that they align their education curricula, but the different programs that are running in those institutions, to what is pertaining in the workforce. It has to speak to that. Now you see that, I'll give a very simple example. Yesterday I had class with my students in microfinance, and I was teaching them about you know, the African Continental Free Trade Area, the different regional organs that we have on the continent, and some of them were so perplexed. They were like, this exists. I'm like, yeah.
Where were they during doing their school studies. Yeah.
And then now you're telling them that, you know what, these are the current issues that are being discussed on the African continent. You cannot pass through university without understanding what the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is all about. Because this is our African thing, our African agreement that is going to... It's the answer to our development in Africa. You know, you tell them about all that, tell them about the Agenda 2063, you tell them about the SDGs, you tell them about the Agenda 2030, you tell them about the the Paris Agreement and all those other things. So it all goes with that. So at the end of the day, our students should also be well attuned to what is pertaining on the ground. They should be updated. Yeah.
But how do you then, or don't you think maybe that prep should start from kindergarten?
Exactly.
You know, grade 7, we should be able to see some form of change in thinking. So based on what you're saying, how then, I mean, we've seen the Ministry of Education wanting to change the curriculum, but I'm sure as parents, as guardians, we've got our own expectations. What do you think should be in that? Based on what you're saying, I think I've got my own conclusion on how I would like to see the curriculum go, but with your research, with what you're saying and how we need to prepare, you know, these students, these young people, and understanding that we have to start this from a very young age. How do we expect the curriculum to be shaped, to be able to shape those young people to be able to fit into what you're talking about? So
today there is so much emphasis on soft skills, okay? There is so much emphasis on young people building their skill set, because they say that, okay, fine, you can have that bachelor's degree, you can have that master's degree, but apart from that, what other skills do you have? What can you bring to the table? So it all goes with that. So with the government and what they're doing, of course, mindset change is a basic thing that has to be done, because it all starts with that. If a child's mind is set right to what they're supposed to do, what they have to do, then everything is going to be okay. I think from the onset, we really have to identify what a child is really good at, because sometimes someone will go through university without even understanding what they want to do. They go to university, they're studying public administration, like, why are you studying public administration? So my mother told me to study public administration, but what do you want to do? And then you find that actually that child's you know, motivation, their dreams are so much different from what their parents are telling them to do. So I feel at this time we really need to focus on developing our students' skill set. Let us build that. Let us work on their mindset to attune it to a productive mindset. So I think it all goes with that. Now in this conference, we are also encouraging students to take part, to also submit their research papers. So the focus is not them to submit papers that are going to get on Google, but to also look at the current issues that are pertaining to the African continent. We have a lot of issues surrounding, you know, the drought issues, you know, trade agreements and all that. So we want them to also be part and parcel of this conference so that they can have a comprehensive view, they can network, and they can also do collaborations with other stakeholders that are going to be around. Right. As we get to conclude, I'll come to you, Mr. Nhike. You know, we're currently facing a drought, and I can only imagine how juicy or how great your research has been. I would please send me a copy of something on drought. Definitely, we will send those copies. But what our research is bringing to the table, what solutions can we possibly look at? Okay, so if you look at what we are trying by all means to find solutions to this drought is that we're trying by all means to be resilient. That's the first thing. We're trying to find solutions on how, especially as Zambia, we want to move away from just the traditional way of doing things. Because if you look at us today, when we look at the agriculture sector, for example, we are dependent completely on maize. 90% of us want to eat shima. Why don't we move and look at more drought-resilient crops like millet and sorghum? Those that are indigenous to the land. Yes, exactly. And we replace them. Replace the maize meal. You see, so those are more drought-resistant, and they are easy to cultivate. We just want to have a change of mindset, and equally, we want to introduce a lot of better ways of cultivating, green agriculture, for example, better aspects. We can even look at issues to do with maybe we try to bring in issues to do with natural fertilizers. If you look at Zambia, for example, 60% of the population in Zambia live below the poverty datum line. And if we're living below the poverty datum line, meaning most of us are actually reliant on subsistence agriculture. We only farm to feed. And those that are reliant on subsistence agriculture, 80% of them are under FISIP. And if we're under FISIP, we get artificial fertilizers. So if we can talk to the government to try by all means to move away from the artificial fertilizer, trying to find
better solutions towards a green agriculture. We look at also agroforestry. What are we doing about agroforestry? If you look at our Zambian continent, our Zambian country today, what we are doing is cutting more than we are planting. We've seen the issues with mukula trees. We've seen the issues to do with the planks and so on and so forth. It doesn't end there. We've got a lot of things that are happening. So if we are to deal with climate change, which is a global issue, we are supposed to start from the local people. We've seen how people are just chopping down trees to make malasha. Yes. And then if you look at from that point, you ask them to say, do you know about climate change? Those people in the rural areas, they'll just think you're stopping them from cutting down trees, which is their source of income. And they do not know the implications of them cutting down trees. So what we need to do, both as policymakers and the researchers, we need to trickle down the information. What is information if you and I are having it and the people at the bottom are not having it?
Right.
We need to trickle down the information so that if we are fighting climate change, let's fight it from the bottom.
I like that. Yes. As we get to conclude, Dr. Bwalia, again back to this drought issue. Maize, I know, is a foreign grain. It's not something that is natural to Africa. I mean, when you look at the terrain as well, that's why millet, cassava, all these things continue to thrive, and yet maize is a struggling commodity. Where did we become obsessed with maize? Do we have that in the research? Where did we become obsessed? Because I don't understand how our ancestors, a lot of people also in the village, would do a lot of the millets, the sorghum, but even they have started slowly becoming obsessed with maize. Where did this obsession come with this foreign grain?
So maybe I can come in.
Please.
If you look at, we've got a course actually in development studies which says history of development and underdevelopment.
Yeah.
So if you look at that course, you realize to say we've come to understand to say people think the things that are coming from the Western world are better than what we have here, and because maize was brought by the Westerners, we assume to say it was better. But if you look at the health benefits of maize and sorghum and millet and sorghum is much better. And we still feel, because we want to just be in a certain class, but let's be real with ourselves to say at this point that we've reached, at the point that we have reached with this government that we have, let's work together and tell the people to say we can be okay with millet and sorghum. We can be okay with changing our preferences.
I hope the people have heard you, because I've been saying that for so long.
If we define the concept of food security, right? We say food security is the access of food at all times in order to live a healthy and active life. So if we speak about living a healthy and active life and we are eating a lot of nshima, my daughter usually says, Mommy, is there piriton in nshima? Because if you eat, you want to sleep. So let's try to have a mindset change and just go to better and accessible products within our country.
I'm just reminded of something very funny. I have a friend at home, and then we prepare rice. So I'm having rice for lunch today. So okay, cool. After rice, then he comes to me and says, what am I having lunch now? So, what are you talking about? So it's the level of obsession, Zambian coward. You know how it is. So, but at the end of the day, we also need to really push for more sensitization around that area, more so that the people around should be comfortable with our local produce. Cassava meal is very healthy, millet, sorghum, and very tasty. You know what I'm saying? So it's so we have to go in those lines.
Well, ladies and gents, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We did have Dr. Chisala Bwalia with us, who is the Zambia Research and Development Center Program Manager. We do have Keresia Teranhike, who is Development Expert for Zambia Research and Development Center. We're going to take a short break.